Good morning, Chairperson, members Garrett and Bollendroff, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thanks, Gretchen. We'll convene the board caucus for Tuesday, October 29th, 2024. Our first item today is a report on the agency's employee engagement focus group, and Jessica Dang, our strategy and performance manager, will join us for that, and I'm sure we'll hear from board member Bollendroff as well on that. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairperson, board members Garrett and Bollendroff. My name is Jessica Dang, and I'm the Strategy and Performance Manager for the agency. I'm going to share my screen quickly here to share my presentation for today. So today I'm here to talk about the employee engagement focus groups that we did over the summer. I did not do them by myself. I was joined by board member Bollendroff, our DEI manager, Jim Weatherly, and Director Lucella also joined us for the focus groups. This morning, I'll talk a little bit about the purpose of the focus group, share some data, share a share a summary of the feedback we received, talk a little bit about next steps, and then feedback on the focus groups themselves. So the purpose of our focus groups was to promote open, productive conversations, help us discover the why behind our employee engagement results, and explore ways to improve the employee experience. This was our second year doing focus groups, and it was really well received last year, so we decided to do them again this year. This year, we did 8 sessions that were held around the state. They were 2.5 hours each. Participation ranged from 5 individuals to 19, and we did a follow-up survey. We were really grateful to be able to travel around the state and meet with our team members. In terms of who participated, so by division, we had a large showing from our enforcement and education division. They were about 60% of the individuals who participated, but we saw growth across all divisions in terms of individuals participating. So it was really great to see this year more representation. The questions that we decided to focus in on this year were as follows. We had 3 questions that we focused on from the employee engagement survey. So question number 3, around being appropriately involved in decisions that impact my work. And that was our 58% positive in our last employee engagement survey. And then the other 2 questions we focused on really, we were hoping to get a better idea around change management in the agency. So the 2 questions there were around senior leadership doing a good job of communicating the reasons behind important changes that are made, and feeling supported during organizational change. So the questions that we asked individuals who participated were, what does it look like to be involved in decision-making for you? We wanted to know how individuals defined senior leadership, because that would help us in crafting action plans afterwards. We wanted to hear what important changes did they expect to know about. Similar to the question 21, we wanted to know how people defined organizational change and what ways they like to receive support during times of change. So now we are in our feedback summary section. So on the question around being involved in decision making, here is what we heard. So overwhelmingly, we heard yes. Involve us in decision-making when possible. Please, no surprises. It was really important to individuals. Making sure to bring in subject matter experts or impacted team members at early stages to inform decision-making, and making sure that you're including voices from other divisions in those conversations was really important. And again, coming back to explaining the why. And here you'll see a couple of quotes from the survey that we did from individuals about their perspective on being involved in decision-making. Our next question, again, was around how did individuals define senior leadership? And overwhelmingly, we heard captains and above, division directors and above. We heard the board, and we heard a few responses around the governor and the legislature being senior leadership. Changes that individuals expected to know about. They wanted to know about things that impact themselves and their team's duties, any organizational changes, knowing about changes that impact our customers, making sure we're informing team members before customers, and then legislation and policy changes were also really important to individuals. I'll just read one of these quotes down here. I expect to know anything that impacts the day-to-day work for me and my team. In the follow-up survey, I added a question around trying to figure out how individuals like to receive information about changes being made. So I asked them to rank these 6 different ways that we often communicate information to employees. So the most effective way is a unit or team meeting, followed by email, a one-on-one with supervisor, division meetings, the all-agency town hall meetings that we do, and the intranet. And we received surveys from about 34 participants this year. In terms of receiving support during times of change, this is what we heard. We heard one-on-ones with the supervisor was an effective way to receive support or to provide support, frequent and transparent communication, having the ability to give feedback and input during times of change was really important. And then having the information and tools then to implement change once a change has been decided. There's a long quote there at the bottom, but I'm going to read it because I think it's a good one. Good, bad, and indifferent. I want to be kept in the loop. Waiting until decisions are made before telling staff may lead to lost opportunities. Your line staff may have a better understanding of how the work is completed and may have a solution to a problem that senior leaders didn't know could be available. So again, involving those closest to the work in these changes so that they can be effective. Then we were able to have some time at each focus group for open feedback. So this was a time for people to dive a bit deeper on the questions we already asked or just to talk about what was on their mind. And here's a summary of what we heard there. Over and over, we heard feedback about following through and follow up when changes are made. So that could look like revisiting a change 6 months to a year later to see, did it actually achieve the outcomes that we were expecting? So that follow up. Communication. So we heard a bit of feedback about the compliance consultant change this year, and so how communication could be improved. That was an example. Just a reminder that supervisors and leadership are not the only subject matter experts. So again, bringing those closest to the work into conversations when appropriate. We heard a bit about safety, recruitment and retention, and again, explaining the why, was really important to individuals. In terms of feedback about the focus groups, overall, we heard that people were generally satisfied, so 4.6 out of 5. And then when we asked if we recommended we conduct them again, the results were a bit more mixed than they were last year. So 76% said yes, we had 19% say maybe, and 5 say probably not. And in terms of what's next, I've shared this summary with the management team, and they're currently exploring opportunities to align with and expand on our strategic plan action items. So thinking about our third goal, which is around culture, adding action items there for their division. I shared this information with the agency. I've also shared it with all the participants, and now I'm sharing it with you all this morning. And just wanted to remind everyone that our employee engagement survey is still open for a couple more days, and that's a really, really important way for us to get feedback about your experience. And with that, that is all I have this morning. Happy to take questions. Yes, Board Member Garrett.
On on one of your slides where it said 34 participants, how does that number compare to the past?
So 34 participants took the post focus group survey. And so that was something different we did this year. Last year, we did a worksheet that individuals did in real time. And so we got more responses on that paper worksheet in real time than we did on the survey. So in terms of how it compared with the past, I think we got, I'd have to look at my notes, but probably around 50 something last year compared to that 34. But overall, we saw, I may have forgotten to share exactly how many individuals we spoke with. I think it was around 90 this year. So about a third.
The survey went to the 90 that you spoke with.
Yes. So
okay,
about a third of them.
34 out of the 90.
Yes.
Not. Oh, okay.
Apologies. I forgot to mention exactly how many individuals we spoke with, but it was around 90. Board
Good.
member?
First of all, I wanted to just thank Jessica and Jim for the work in organizing these sessions with employees, and then acknowledge that our director, Will, participated in all of these. I think it's a demonstration of our commitment to wanting to hear from employees. And I just have to say, for me personally, this is the second year in a row that I've participated in these. And were it not for these sessions, I wouldn't know nearly as many people as I do within the LCB. So it's just personally rewarding for me as a board member to get out there and to get to know many of our employees. And I want to acknowledge and thank the employees who took the time, because it is a chunk of your day and you're very busy as it is now, but we really value your input. And, I don't know whether we'll do these again. It looks like employees, 3/4 are recommending that we do it again. I think that's yet to be decided. But it is an opportunity for us to hear from our greatest resource. And, I think that the good, bad, and or indifferent quote that Jessica shared is really important, because what we heard from employees loud and clear is they're not always going to agree with all the decisions. And so it's not about agreeing with all the decisions that are made within the LCB. It's really being involved in the decision making, hearing things in a timely manner, and understanding that why. Jessica mentioned that as well. So I thought it was really good. And I look forward to participating again should we decide to do them a next round. So thank you, Jessica. Great job of summarizing this.
Thank you.
Jessica, of the people who attended focus groups, and you showed that pie chart from where they came within the agency, how does that compare roughly to the general population of the agency? Is it representative? Or are we overhearing from any group or underhearing from some group?
Let me just quickly go back there. Well, obviously, we heard a lot from our team members in enforcement and education. I think we could hear a bit more from some of our other divisions. Yes, it would be nice to have additional participation from some of our other divisions that are listed here.
That's just something to think about if we do it again next year. And is there data from engagement surveys in the past? I know different questions get asked at different times that could show us a historic trend on a question related to wanting to be kept in the loop of decision making.
As you know, last year was the first year of a new set of questions for all agencies. I would have to go back and see. Prior to that, there was similar questions.
And knowing, I know that we changed the specifics of those questions, but if there's any way to look at how we've done on that type of question over the years would be good, or what the state average is even. And if there's something anybody's doing about it, that would be helpful to know at some point, I think. But Will, anything to add from your?
No, I think I enjoyed being part of the process. It was a good learning experience for me, and a great experience to be able to spend time with staff and get their feedback.
Great. Okay,
Well, thank
Well,
you.
that's it. Thanks. Appreciate it. We will move to our next item now, which is briefing on our education team from our Education Enforcement and Education Division. And I'll turn it over to Matt McCollum, who's the Education Program Manager. Good morning.
Good morning. Sorry about that. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Sure can.
Awesome. All right. So my name is Matt McCallum. I'm the Education Program Manager for the Enforcement Division. And I've been asked to give a little update on our program. We've gone through a lot of changes in the past year and a half, 2 years. And so I'm going to kind of start by going through this a little bit. Where we were and where we're moving to, and some of the outputs and how we're going about building this and how we're interacting with licensees. So going back to 2023, we created the education program. And when I say created it, as many people know, we already had consultants that were already created, but they reported directly to commission staff. And we really wanted to make sure that the education had its own program that had specifically education priorities, and not that it was in conflict with what the officers do, because they work really well together, but we really wanted to make sure that our non-commissioned staff are supervised by non-commissioned staff, and our priorities for that program were very specific, and we could really articulate the work that they do and how it's different or how it's the same as what commissioned staff do. So we created that program, and under that program as well lives the education specialist, who's Kelly Hallows, and she creates a lot of our education content, our guides for licensees, newsletters, all kinds of content to help our licensees be educated consistently and have resources. And then we have the advertising coordinator position as well, which is Taryn Myers, and she does a fantastic job. And that covers more than just cannabis as well. It covers MIW and other things, and she does a fantastic job, because that's one of the more laborious topics that we deal with in terms of complaints and nuance to how that's enforced, and we really want to try to be consistent with that. So she's been a real blessing in that position. We increased the number of cannabis consultants. A lot of that was through FTEs received through social equity legislation, and then we received some more this past year as well. And then we spent a lot of time really adjusting our workflows, our policies and procedures, working with other divisions. Our licensing division has been fantastic to work with in analyzing how we look at the final inspection process, and redoing kind of that, as well as working with finance, the audit team, and also tax reporting and how we deal with providing education for those who maybe are struggling to keep up on their tax payments. So moving into 2024, we kind of had a even more structural change, in the sense that we got more FTEs, and that requires a lot of sort of reshuffling of areas and looking at prioritization. We received FTEs from the waste bill, where licensees can now sell their waste. And out of that, we decided to, because of the workload of the West Side cannabis consultant supervisor, we decided to bump one of those up to another supervisor position, because we had one supervisor that oversaw 7 individuals at the time. And remember, there's a key difference between a cannabis consultant supervisor and, say, like a lieutenant on the commission side, and that's that our compliance consultant supervisors have an assigned area and work the field with assigned licensees. And so that takes away from their administrative supervisor duties. So it was really imperative that we create another supervisor position. So now we have 3 cannabis supervisor positions. And then later in this year, we began developing this same concept, but in liquor. And really had kind of a short turnaround time for that, but created 4 liquor consultant positions, one of which is a supervisor. And we got super lucky with that in Maureen Wheeler, who has 10 years of experience as a commissioned lieutenant on the liquor side. and brought her and just loves education, and was at a point in her career that she was really excited to do the education piece and really dive into that. So she's been a real blessing with the building of that program. And we have all of those liquor positions hired, and we're going to start putting out some measurable product here shortly there. And the cannabis positions as well, we had to kind of backfill and shuffle around, because there's a transfer process that is implemented when we created new liquor positions. And so there's kind of a vacuum there as people transfer and move. And we have every one of those except for one location hired. And we could hire that one. We're just kind of holding off for training reasons. And I'll go over kind of how we train our staff later. But we're almost back to full strength for our education team. I kind of wanted to go over some of these positions just to give people a better idea of kind of the work that they do. Our education specialist creates predominantly external education for licensees. That doesn't mean we won't create some other things and that it's not useful for, consumers and things like that. But the primary goal of that one is education content that's identified by either licensees or our field staff, either commission staff or our compliance consultants, or even other divisions. I know Kelly works a lot with Marissa and licensing, and they have a really good relationship at building, mutual education for our agency, which is awesome. And then some of the things that she puts out, compliance guides, enforcement bulletins, presentations. She helped me put this presentation together. But we have a lot of presentations that we give statewide or, even, in other states. And she helps put those together, newsletters, graphics, and then law and rule guides, especially when we come out with new rules and new laws. We usually see kind of how they're received, and then we can adjust and make, real tailored content for what our licensees are looking for. Our advertising coordinator, I like to highlight this one because a lot of folks focus on the cannabis side because that one's kind of the noisiest one in terms of how much change there is, or how many complaints we may get, or topics that come up in general to the public that people see. But she does a lot of work as well with liquor, and specifically MIW. So this position manages an MIW box that covers sweepstakes proposals and rebate proposals for manufacturers, and looks at a lot of those contracts as well, and works with licensing and our officers on those. Does a lot of work with things that are appealing to youth, signage issues, general advertising inquiries, and is also works really closely with the licensing folks, and Susan Harrell, to make sure that we're being consistent between our edible stuff and our non-edible stuff, and how we're looking at appealing to youth things. So she's been great on that. And she's also a subject matter expert when we're looking at legislation around advertising, because it seems like just about every year we get something related to advertising, and so having a subject matter expert that spends time in the field and is working closely with our staff and licensees is imperative. And you can kind of see sort of the magnitude of some of the numbers that, and that's for fiscal year 24, that she gets. So it's a pretty big workload in terms of topics she covers. Our cannabis consultants, I just threw in some fiscal year 24 data so people can kind of get a feel for the sheer volume of work that they do. But they're doing predominantly final inspections, annual inspections, alterations inspections, which is a form of final. We worked really close with licensing and condensed that into one form. So we use the same form for all of those premises checks. So we're consistently providing the same education, and we can look at any one of those line items and go, yeah, we've delivered this education at least X amount of times, in the last week or month or year. So we're really trying to be more mindful about how we're measuring what we do. They do consultation visits, although those don't really come up that much. We don't get many requests for those. Responsible sales classes is a big function of what they do. Licensee support, education outreach, tax reporting support. So if folks aren't paying their taxes, they're going to go out and educate them on what the requirements are and how best to remedy that issue. And then most of what they do in terms of notifying licensees with education is an NTC, which is just formal education. It's capturing a formal education, and it's pretty prescribed in RCW, the content that's in those. And I'm going to go over an NTC, what's in those a little bit later. But and then they do daily EN reporting. So every contact they have, they enter into our data system and take notes on and add attachments to. And then they do monthly data reporting directly to me and their supervisors as kind of a check and balance. But you can see 807 notice to corrects fiscal year 2024, covering over 1,300 different violations. And of those, we only escalated 31. An escalation would be we simply can't get across through education that something needs to be fixed, so we put it up with a commission person, commission staff to talk with them about. So, and rarely is it that even those escalated ones necessarily would end in an AVN. So just because it's escalated doesn't mean it goes to AVN. It could be a verbal, it could be a written, but that's kind of our version of a compliance rate, I guess, for a consultant, since we don't do AVNs. Over 700 annual inspections, lots of final inspections, which I always like to highlight because people think, well, we're not handing out lots of new licenses, but we still do a ton of final inspections because there's a lot of change of locations and sales, and licensing is doing tons of work over there. And so are the consultants in kind of finalizing some of that. And of those, we only return 29 to licensing, and we would return it if they're not ready, essentially, to do the final inspection process. And we did, over 3,300 premises checks in that year. And our goal is to spend 60% of our time in the field. And it's been trending upwards. And we overall for the year, we're at over 56% of our time spent face-to-face with licensees in the field. So the creation of the new liquor compliance consultant positions, I really wanted to kind of go over what that's, in theory going to look like as they get started here. A lot of their duties are, we only have we have 4, but really 3.5, because again, one of those is a supervisor that works an area. So they're not going to be able to spend the same amount of time in the field, but we're really trying to hit on things that are important for our licensees and are supportive of our commission staff, and we can really sink our teeth into from an educational standpoint. So responsible liquor sales, again, really emphasizing the public safety piece there and supporting our commission staff and our licensees by reaching out and giving as many of those as possible. Annual inspections, responsible vendor program premises checks. So we've developed a checklist where we're going to go out to those places that are in this responsible vendor program and just check and make sure that they're meeting the requirements of this responsible vendor program. It's not something that would ever end in a violation or anything like that, and that's not the point. It's to make sure that we're keeping licensees informed about those requirements and making sure that we're doing the best we can to keep people safe and limit sales to minors and things like that. They're going to be working with expired licenses, delinquent or missing reports, some minor complaint assistance, and then alterations, when there's alterations, taking photos and measurements for licensing. I did want to cover the training process. So with our consultants, they spend 1 week with the supervisor, 3 weeks with commissioned police officers, 3 weeks with experienced compliance consultants, and then a final week with the supervisor. And those supervisors are all experienced either officers or compliance consultants before. We just hired 2 new field supervisors on the west side, and both have been compliance consultants for multiple years. So we have some really good experience in there. And then we do training reporting during this process too. So through the FTO process, they're doing daily observation reports, weekly rates of progress. They have checklists and tests. We're coordinating with our training team here in enforcement. And then we have constant communication between trainer, supervisor, and manager. And then myself and DC have to review those training packets as well, along with the training program. So it's pretty rigorous, and there's lots of reporting, and we're really making sure that our staff are prepared for the work that they're going to be doing. I did want to kind of show the regional maps. The left side is the cannabis consultant areas. Looks kind of like my grandmother's quilts that she used to make, because we got a lot of folks and a lot of colors on there. And and then the liquor one is a little larger. I do like to show those two because, you know, there's a lot that goes into drawing of these maps. Drive time, whether or not that area has an electric or gas car, or, you know, whether or not that's going to be needed moving forward. How many licensees are in that area? What types of licenses are in that area, especially for cannabis? You're looking at a lot more outdoor grows on the east side, a lot more drive time. On the west side, it's going to be a lot more condensed. So how are you going to make sure that, you know, we're covering those areas effectively? So these things are kind of constantly tweaking based off of FTEs or movement. And then when we have people out, designing them in a way that we can potentially have coverage for vacant areas is key too. Because I'll tell you right now, like we have, you know, when we have vacant areas for like, you know, the northwestmost portion of the state, and we have people covering that, that's a heavy lift for our staff. So making sure we're real aware of how we draw those and how we can support those is important. And it's key too, because licensing utilizes this as well, so that they know who to send things to. So there's a lot of interaction with this. Notice to correct, this is the primary tool of education. It's not the only one. We do lots of guides and other things, but if we notice, if my staff notice a violation, we want to make sure we're providing to the point and clear, concise education. And this is like a copy of a book, like a carbon copy book. We don't really use those anymore. We do all digital, and we're going to email it to them. But as well, we're doing it in person. Most of these arise either through complaints or through annual inspections. So we're going out. We have this big long list of a checklist that we go through, and we may find things. And they're going to give a detailed description of what's not compliant, the law and rule that applies to that, how long they have to try to fix that. You know, if they need an extension, we talk with them about that. This isn't a gotcha. This isn't a ticket. This isn't a warning. This is, even though it looks like that, and the reason really it looks like that is because in RCW, it has requirements of what has to be on there that kind of makes it appear that way. But we really try hard to make it clear. This isn't a ticket or anything like that. This is simply us trying to document clearly and concisely, here's what's wrong, here's what we need you to fix. And we try to can these whenever possible too for consistent language as well. So if we have topics that are like tax reporting and things like that, where the language can be the same, we try to do that and put in links to our education. So we're not just handing them a piece of paper. It has, you know, more to it than that. And consultants can't write warnings of any kind, just as a caveat there. They don't write verbals, they don't write writtens, they're just doing education. Complaints we get, you know, there's two main types of complaints, internal and external. Our internal ones, we call them complaints for lack of a better word, but they're not really complaints. It's just sort of identification of issue. That's just kind of the only term for it in our current data system in the EN. So we get reports from our audit team where they've discovered issues that are in addition to maybe what, if they're assessing a penalty or not, they may find other issues that we're going to go provide education on. Monthly tax reporting, expired licenses, complaints from licensees that are not public safety related, or you know, former employees. External complaints are assigned to education staff. We determine if the complaint has enough information to write an NTC or not. We visit the licensees in person and discuss the complaint. If a clear violation exists, we're going to give them an NTC. We're going to formally document it. If it doesn't exist, we're going to provide them the same exact education. It's just not in an NTC, because we're not saying you have a violation, but we don't want to miss the opportunity to provide the same education on the topic. So we really try to be consistent with what we provide there. And there's a lot to the program, but I want to give time for questions as well. And I hope that gives a little better input into all the movement and stuff we got going on. Yeah, Board Chair Garrett. Board Member Garrett.
I wrote down several things. Some of it you actually answered as you went on. The question on the tax reporting, does finance get things to you all early on before it's way behind? Is there a process to once somebody is 30 days, 60 days? At what point do you guys get that to go talk about with a licensee?
Yeah. Yeah, so we actually have a process written down for it. So finance works with them, and they're contacting them individually, trying to provide education that route first. So the
Okay.
first month is solely through finance. Enforcement's not involved at all. And then if
Okay.
that month passes and they show up again, so at this point they're 2 months late, or maybe they have paid late for consecutive months and they're consecutively paying late, they'll let my staff know, and then we'll go out and provide the education on it. And then if they continue to not pay or continue to be late over a 2-year period, that's when it may escalate to something more. But we're really bending over backwards, trying to give them every opportunity to come into compliance before it goes that route. So, and it was designed that way on purpose. Instead of us going out right away, finance is really trying to take their approach. If they exhaust it and they can't, then our education team comes in, and we actually built a tax reporting guide in conjunction with finance and Kelly that we share together and use as education. So we're being consistent with our education.
Right. So doing the training, the notice to correct, all of this is all jammed in one statement and question. When there are situations where you see consistent, some of the same things occurring with different retailers or different licensees, or it having to issue notice to correct of the same subject matter, so to speak, are we looking and working with folks on what we can do as an agency with our training materials to help them, and 2-in-1, and have we updated what we are doing, the videos, the training and things, to match this 2024 workforce? And what I mean by that, there's a lot of folks, young people that are more in tune to visual, different ways of educating and training them. How we updated our process of training and helping them train.
Yeah, so we actually just redid all of our responsible sales class slides in our training, and that's kind of a constant tweak with that. We want to stay consistent. We don't want it to be completely different statewide, but as topics come up, we adjust those slides and adjust the training that we provide for responsible sales. And responsible sales covers a lot more than just like, hey, don't sell to minors.
Right.
And we've done a lot in relatively recently as well. That's reactive in a good way. So, a couple of years ago, I provided retail safety training on how to avoid robberies and how to be safe during those, in conjunction with a nonprofit up in Seattle. And so, yeah, we do, and then that's where Kelly comes in as well. If we have consistent trends, so let's say prohibited practice things keep showing up in audit reports. Well, we're putting out a newsletter this month that covers that and reminds folks, what prohibited practice is, how we can avoid that, and talking with your consultants. And then we try to build it into the processes we have too. So if something's really showing up as a consistent issue, we're going to emphasize that more during our annual inspections, whether that's, medical endorsement requirements right now, or whatever the topic that seems to be trending is. But yes, they do come in kind of clusters and groups. We'll see a bunch of things all at once on one topic, and then we'll address that in education. Then we'll see another one. But we do have a lot of options, and we are always exploring other things too, in terms of, I know with, we're looking into maybe changing our responsible sales class, like if there's testing after watching that, and making sure there's some sort of feedback loop that they're understanding and comprehending what's there. But yes, to answer your question.
Yeah, and thank you for this. I think this is great. And I'm sure, knowing that all of our licensees are also small business owners and things, this is great that and I'm sure they appreciate us having this process and in the education piece. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jim?
Thank you, Matt. That was really great. I appreciate the information. I think, for me, listening to you is just such a testament to the role that we play in making sure that we are here to help our licensees be successful at the end of the day. And that's a balancing act as a regulator, licensee, enforcement agency, where we also have role and responsibility to make sure that we're not selling products to age-restricted individuals, we're not over-serving individuals, etc. So I just am really pleased to hear the effort that goes into helping our licensees stay in compliance and giving opportunities. Thinking about the sales to minor and over service specifically, like to me, those are two areas where we're probably not going to do as much in terms of education and opportunities. Are there other areas? First of all, my question, is that true? And then secondly, are there other areas where we're less likely to provide more education and go right to enforcement? Just trying to get myself clear on the distinction between when we're doing, more enforcement versus education with licensees.
Yeah, and one of the things to remember, and this is always hard when I give this presentation because I give versions of this, to different groups. This is just our education program side of it. Our officers take extreme pride and love providing education, and they do a ton of it. And that was actually one of the challenges we had with the creation of the liquor side was our officers were adamant, like we love building relationships with our licensees. We love helping them. We don't want that taken away from us. So we're kind of designing those programs to work together so that everybody's providing education. And we actually do provide a lot of education on preventing sales to minors and over-service. Now, for cannabis, over-service isn't a thing because we don't have on-premise consumption locations. But for liquor specifically, I know, our officers spend a lot of time working with licensees, and then as well as, our mask trainings and all of that sort of stuff that, our mask coordinators work really hard at that content. So there's actually a significant amount of time spent on trying to proactively avoid the sales to minors and over service, as well as reactionary follow-ups. If you get a sale, hey, let us come out and give you a responsible sales class. Let us come out and prevent this from happening again. So there is actually a lot of work that goes into it. It's not completely one of those that's hard to educate on. And we are looking at expanding that. We used to, before COVID, have static classes. Like you could go to a field office once a month or once a quarter and sign up for responsible sales classes. And we're looking at talking about doing that again, either virtually or in person, or maybe both options. That's something that we're exploring in the enforcement division. And we actually, a lot of times with cannabis too, our staff like to do it together at times too. It's good. It's a good way to introduce licensees to a new officer or to a new consultant, and really show buy-in that, our officers aren't out to get you. They're here to educate you and help you as much as the consultants are. And it's kind of a team effort from the licensee and state side to keep our communities safe. In terms of the other part of your question, and can you remind me the second half of that? I just want to make sure I answer it exactly.
I think you actually covered the majority of my question. Okay. So I'm going to actually move on to just something else, and that is that I am excited to see how the whole alcohol compliance consultants actually roll out. I'll tell you that one of the things that I heard during the employee forums was a lot of the folks on the cannabis side saying, hey, once you see how this works, I think you're really going to like it. And so I'm just excited to see how that rolls out. And I'm also grateful that it brings more staff into E&E to be working with our licensees. We've had a lot of vacancies, and it's nice to see some of those vacancies get filled in a way that can help us maintain our mission of working with our licensees. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Matt, a couple of questions. How will you use the FTE that you got for social equity? Is that like exclusive for people who are
It's not exclusive for social equity, and there haven't been that many out there. And really the retail final inspection process and the education we provide is pretty consistent for those. It's just that we're there's potentially an influx over time of final inspections and brand new final inspection, meaning like someone who's new to the industry completely, right? That isn't someone moving locations or anything else. So it's really important that we have that staff to provide that. And we do try to give that's one of the things the consultants are there for when they initially do the final. You're not a licensee yet. We can't write NTCs even if we wanted to during a final. We're there just to get you prepared and ready to go. And then we're following up with those annuals to check on you and make sure like, hey, did the stuff we talk about before make sense? Is there any questions that you have now? And I'll say like our staff are, they get texts from their licensees, emails, they're calling constantly. And really that's what we need that extra staff for, is trying to build that relationship with those. So,
Yeah.
but really right now, I mean, it's there aren't enough of them that it's like all of a sudden we have 50 in one city or something. There it's scattered around enough that it wouldn't be enough for one person.
Right. One of your slides, you mentioned that there's very few consultation visits. What is that? And how is that different than?
Yeah, so it's actually in legislation that they can request a consultation visit, and a consultation visit is, hey, we know we have this violation issue and we need help with it, and we want the opportunity to have someone come out and help us fix that, without penalty or anything else. Obviously within reason. We're not, you can't come out and have serious issues and have it fall under a consultation visit. But that's really what it's for, is at request. I'm not completely sure why it isn't utilized. It was something the industry had asked for, and there's a way to request those on our website. And when we get those, we go out and provide those. We just don't get that many. And without having data necessarily to support this, I sort of suspect it's that way because, we have these positions now. They're out in the field constantly. It's extremely rare that we have licensees that we just don't know anything about what's going on and we're not in contact with them. So I suspect that need for a consultation visit just has kind of gone down over time because we spend so much time in the field with them.
Yeah.
But it is an option available. It's just not utilized that often.
Okay. And then similar, this may just be a nomenclature thing, but you said that consultants don't do any warnings. So, but education. So where's that line? Like, I don't know exactly what a warning is versus education. You've got when a consultant goes in, sees something that's not compliant.
Yep.
Can they just say without writing an NTC or doing anything, hey, just FYI, that's no good?
They can. We try to capture those in an NTC so that we can verify that we're being consistent with our education. If we just go out and say, hey, fix this, we're not capturing that we provided adequate education, and then we can't make adjustments to it if it doesn't work. So we try to be really diligent about our NTCs, but they are different than a verbal and a written. And the NTC was created specifically to not be a verbal or written warning and not be under that same class, because some insurance companies may consider a verbal or written warning an enforcement action, even though enforcement doesn't. Right. It's to us, it's just a warning. So it'll look very similar. To us, a verbal isn't punitive, a written isn't punitive. It is just a warning. An NTC looks like a warning, but technically it's not. It's kind of a nomenclature thing, but it is very important to divide those two, at least for us, so that, because what we don't want to have is our staff writing verbals and writtens and then taking that opportunity of education away from the officers and their discretion to provide that education that way. And NTCs specifically, once they were in RCW, we try to adhere to those and utilize those first.
An NTC in those cases is the sort of lowest level of action, even though
it's the initial capturing that education is being provided. And there are instances where we can't do NTC. So as an example, if someone is way over canopy, I've been very adamant that we can't write an NTC for that, because the only conclusion of that NTC is you have to destroy product, right? So that's not really education. And every time topics come up, these are the things that the captains and I and DCs discuss, or, what's appropriate for this? Does this fall outside of what an NTC should be? And that's, part of what we juggle with, or what complaints can we provide education on, and which ones are kind of too severe to start with that, and a lot of it comes down to, can we show that we've already, exhausted or tried to offer education on topics. But typically, like I showed in that one slide, it's not a compliance rate because that refers to compliance checks specifically, but the amount of NTCs that result in people fixing the issues is really high. And if we unfortunately do have to kick things forward, it makes it a lot easier for our commission staff because we can really display that this isn't a confusion issue. This is a disagreement on what the intent or what the law and rule really means. So,
right. And so, to use that example of the canopy, if it's not something you can write, one of your people can write an NTC, but does that then go to commission officer?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
And we have a process for that as well, where our consultant supervisors work in conjunction with the commission lieutenants, and it's really common that we'll sit down and try to not for a canopy, but for other issues, we'll sit down and try to brainstorm ways to handle complaints through education and get creative with it, things that maybe traditionally weren't. And part of that is due to staffing, issues on the officer side. We only have so many officers across the state, and we get tons and tons of complaints. If officers are sitting on 50, 60 complaints each, we really got to try to utilize those consultants as sort of a pressure release valve for some of those and get creative with how we handle them, which can be difficult at times, but the officers and consultants on the cannabis side work really well together. So
great. Good. Okay, thank you for all that. I don't see any other questions for you. Nice job on the presentation, and good work with your team too. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to our last item, which is board member reports. Does any board member have anything to add before we adjourn?
I have nothing. Thank you.
Okay, then we will adjourn, and we'll be back next week. We have a board meeting and a caucus. So next Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning. Okay, we're adjourned.